Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Welcome to another episode of Modern Chiropractic Mastery. This is your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, and today I'm bringing a solo episode with you, and it is on the idea of a profit-sharing model. I don't think it's for everybody, but I do see a lot of value in it. And I want to give you a little bit of background first with, where the kind of the synthesis of this has come, because another disclaimer, I'm not a financial expert. I've been in practice for 20 years, been fortunate enough to interview a lot of experts and also be taught by a lot of financial experts. And, this isn't what I've necessarily created. I've applied it to my practice, and I'm going to share with you that, and you can kind of work with your expert, your accountant, maybe you have a financial coach, or maybe you bring on someone to help you out with this. But where this came from was, just give a little background, was Mastermind 2023 in the East in Fort Lauderdale. We had Dr. Ray Tuck, the late Dr. Ray Tuck, present to us his model, and just a little background. 10, 11 clinics through the Virginia area, and they use the profit sharing model for their doctors that were with them for some period of time and for their many of their satellite locations. And he taught us a lot about how they structure theirs. A lot of that was derived from, and I've read The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack, a really good book recommendation I have for you. And they talk a lot about the ESOP model in there, ESOP, basically kind of like a stock option aspect. And I've read that book. I've had John Williams on recently, so I recommend that was just, that would have been maybe in February or March of 2025, had him on, and he is certified in that. He is actually coming to present for our East-West Combo Mastermind in October of 2025 and going to be discussing the Great Game of Business, and I'm excited about that. Also have had Greg Crabtree on the podcast, had him come and do a training session for our mastermind members. And he talked a lot about different aspects of what we're going to talk about today. Always recommend his stuff and his book, Simple Numbers 2.0. And then we've applied this recently to our practice, and that's where we've kind of come up with some of the things that we're doing with our profit sharing model. Now, again, some of the disclaimers I have, I do not think this is necessarily for everyone. I do think almost all clinics could make this work. I don't have all the nuances of maybe like a 5, 6, 7 doctor practice. No, some other disclaimers is, not quite sure what it would look like if you have partnerships that maybe are not spousal and what that looks like. Again, I'm not a financial expert. I don't have all the answers either. And one of the things I actually did was, previous to this me recording this episode, we had our Charleston Mastermind, our East group, and I kind of presented to this and got a lot of good feedback from it as well. And so always looking for feedback as we go along, but so far so good as we've applied it to our practice. Let's take a break from today's episode and announce our first sponsor. This is going to be Propel Marketing and Design. I've known Darcy Sullivan for years. We've worked hand in hand on my websites. I don't trust anybody else to do this search engine optimization. She does a great job. There's so much to it. A lot of the lingo and the words are beyond my comprehension, but it's just amazing work that she does. And if you're really going to get results with Google, you have to make sure your website is SEO optimized. And I really don't want you doing it yourself as a chiropractor. So you just have to have this type of stuff done. And if you're looking to get more organic online traffic that pulls in new patients, Propel Marketing and Design is currently offering chiropractors who listen to this podcast a free SEO website review. The free review will help you uncover methods that will improve your website and boost your search engine visibility. Head over to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor and schedule your free SEO website review. You won't regret it. She gets great results. Your website needs this. Your search results need this. Head on over there to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor to get your free SEO website review. Now, I think some of the issues that we see with just overall associate compensation, which has obviously been a struggle for both employer and associate, and it's made it hard to retain really good talent. I think that's some of the issues we're seeing with associate compensation. I think the salary only, like, or what the salary demands are, or salary desires of associates and what owners can afford is not in line. That's just a harsh reality that a lot of us are seeing. And it's not that the associate isn't quote unquote worth X amount of dollars. It's how many evidence-based chiropractic employers out there can afford to do that on a pure salary for just treating patients. And the reality of it is typically the owner is losing money on that doctor for quite some time until they're fully integrated on board in the practice and actually start building a patient base. There's the percentage of collections, right? The split, and that's a tricky one. That's the most common and still in many cases the easiest and can be very beneficial for both parties. But it's tricky because the percentage of collections doesn't take in the rising cost of overhead. So, for an example, if you had an associate and they were getting 45% of collections, and that started 7 years ago, and they're still with you, your overhead has probably significantly increased since then, and it doesn't take that into consideration because they're getting a percentage of the top line, not the bottom line. And then, there's a lot of, I think, Greg Crabtree talks about where it's really hard for the employer. The reality of it is, and I know a lot of associates may not want to hear this, and maybe even some employers don't, but it's really hard to make it work if the associate is getting uh, above like 40, 45, 50% or more. If this person's a W-2, you got to also consider that when you write those checks to that employee, you're getting payroll taxed on that. You're getting another 10% taxed. And so Greg Crabtree talks about really kind of like between a 30 and 40% for the treating doctor is where the sweet spot tends to be, to where it actually makes viable sense for the owner to take on that risk and all the overhead that is part of a business that a lot of times isn't seen there. And so there's some, issues with with that. A lot of nuances around the percentage. I still think it's a very good model. Just you got to be teased out appropriately. I think another issue with associate compensation is the lack of either perceived growth by the associate or actual growth. Like they feel like they're stuck and there's no real room for growth professionally and financially, right? And that's a key thing. And then lastly, and I'm sure there's more than this, but just wanted to kind of tease this out a little bit before we dive into some of the specifics. Is fitting a higher doctor income, just like say a straight salary into the 2.0 number, the Greg Crabtree 2.0 number. So let me give a quick definition of that. And if you need more, you can Google it. You can chat GPT it. But basically, what Greg Crabtree has written about and teaches about and has studied for years is that, let's say you have a $500,000 a year business, so you collect $500,000. Your overall labor costs, including payroll taxes, should be about $250,000. So, 2.0, you divide the 500,000 by 250,000 payroll, and that is 2.0. His range he gives is a 1.9 to 2.1. I'll let you do that math, but think about it, right? So if you had a $500,000 revenue practice, you would need to keep your overall labor costs to about $250,000, give or take. And, how much of that is going to you as the treating owner, how much is going to your other staff, and then obviously fitting in a, 75, 80, $90,000 pure salary into that payroll to make it make sense financially as a business is really hard. It's where you got to start getting up there if you're gonna do that. Okay, and I think some of the benefits of a profit sharing model is one is it gives the associate doctor an ownership mentality. They're actually going to bear some of the fruit of this. There's going to be some room for growth for the associate financially because they can grow as the practice grows and how as they help grow the practice. Two, it's a good education of the associate. I think if you provide some clarity and training within finances around this, they will benefit greatly from that. And that's, I think, a lot of times unfortunate when associates maybe work somewhere for a few years and they don't get any of that type of training and they open up on their own and they're kind of lost financially on what the realities of it are. And so this really educates in that. I think it lessens the burden on salary creep, right? Like the kind of salaries keep on creeping up, and it's maybe not based on production, but based on just, the fact the person's been there for another year and another year and another year. It takes into consideration overhead, right? So if overhead goes up, then that could eat into profits and that could eat into the profit share. And so you want to make sure everybody is growing appropriately. It's going to help for ideal practice growth. And we're seeing that in our practice since we've implemented this, which has been really nice. And I think it's an ideal setup for an intrapreneur, right? So if you had to categorize three types of chiropractors, associates, which we have in the past on other episodes, but like one might be just your pure clinician on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have your entrepreneur type. And in the middle is that builder chiropractor. That entrepreneur really has a good entrepreneur spirit to him, but functions better within the frameworks of an existing practice. And I feel like this profit sharing model has a really good um, uh, combination of things to that is ideal for that intrapreneur, right? So that entrepreneur. Now, um, Ray Tuck, when he had taught us this, there's a couple levers you can pull, which is pretty cool, right? So because a lot of people was like, okay, what percentage of profit are they getting? And it could be a range. Nothing's setting in stone, but it could be his recommendation was anywhere from between 20 and 30% on what that is. And then, you're going to have two levers. Okay, what's the associate salary? And then what's the percentage of profit share? And if you go a little you could decide to go a little bit lower on the um, regular straight salary and a little higher on the percentage, or you can go a little bit higher on the salary and a little lower on the percentage. I think you definitely need to run your numbers. And if you do the math and you say, well, if I gave them 30% profit on this, that doesn't make sense, right? Like that'd be just way too much money for the production done. And so you got to look at your own books. There's not a clear cut on this, and I'm not going to give you one on it. We do help chiropractors work through this and figure some of that stuff out in our coaching side of things, but it's hard to just give you a straight, okay, you got to do this. And then the other thing is like, you're not going to just hire a doctor with this model, right? You're going to say, okay, you're starting tomorrow and you're going to get a profit share. No, they're going to earn the profit share. There's going to be a doctor after at least 1 year. I would say give it a year and they get a salary and then they can be eligible for the profit share if set some certain metrics, right? Like if you can then answer the question, knowing what I know now, would I hire this doctor again? And it's a hell yes, then they're probably worth putting onto a profit sharing model. So you're not doing this for just because they got a job. They are going to work towards this and earn it. And then from there, you may have to tweak the salary up or down and the percentage, and you can work on those two knobs. And so maybe it's a 55,000. Again, this is completely general, but maybe it's a $55,000 salary, but it's a nice 25% profit share. Or maybe you're going to go up a little bit on the salary and down to a 20%. Or maybe you just got a really profitable practice that brings in $1 million. And if you just gave them 30% profit share or even 20% profit share, it just wouldn't make sense. And so maybe it's a 15% profit share. And when you run the numbers, that particular associate doctor, if they do their thing and they get 15% of profit, they're making the same or more as another doctor in a different practice with a 30% profit share, right? Because it's all relative to how much profit there is. And so I know a lot of you are probably asking, if you're on the associate side, is like, well, can't the owner hide profit? Well, yeah, they can, but not if you do this right and not if you provide one of the key things in this, which is you definitely need to provide clarity, right? Now, you don't necessarily you'll want to give a payroll number for the clinic each month, but not who's getting what, right? So it might just say, okay, yeah, payroll for the clinic is $25,000, but doesn't tease out who's getting what. So the associate doesn't have to know who's getting paid what, but they'll need to know what the expenses are. And so a lot of the devils are in the details with this, and this is going to be really, you got to consider your operating expenses and not necessarily all expenses. Okay. So, for instance, if you run your car through your business, that's not going to go into this overhead. Like, that's not an expense to run the business. And so that shouldn't ding the associate on the profits, right? And so it's really your operating expenses. And the other one, and people ask, like, what about debt payments? Well, I think if it was a like an equipment loan that had an RI, you would probably consider that in there as overhead. If it's you got an EIDL loan from 5 years ago and you're making a payment on that, I would not put that in there. That is, wouldn't burden the overhead with that. That would come out of profits, right? That would, and on your end of the profits. So, debt payments, I think you need to work with your advisor on like what would be included in there. Like if you have a table lease, yes, could go in your operating expenses and impact that profit sharing. Let's take a short break for one of our great sponsors, TrackStat. It is a new type of software plugin for your EHR that combines patient communication, marketing, automation, and statistics with patient and employee tracking. Built by chiropractors for chiropractors, it shows your team what to focus on each day. See patient visit habits, missing information, unpaid bills, insurance collection visit average, and more. Great visibility of data so you can focus on filling your office with your best patients. When you can see what your staff and patients are doing or not doing and take action accordingly, your profits naturally grow. Take TrackStat for a test drive in your office with our free trial. Not a techie? No problem. We can help. To get started on your free trial, visit trackstat.org and watch the demo. That is trackstat.org. The other thing that you need to do in this model typically is paying yourself a fair salary, right? And what that looks like as a treating doctor. And then I'm not going to get into like the owner's salary versus set distribution, right? So let's say you're going to pay yourself $100,000 a year as the treating owner for treating patients, but maybe you and your accountant decide to pay yourself $60,000 as a W-2 salary and $40,000 as an owner's distribution, as a set distribution. Now that full 100,000 would go into the payroll as an overhead for that profit sharing model, but you're just divvying it up separately. And that particular set distribution, I'll call it for the sake of argument, is different than a profit distribution that you take after the fact. Because the way this really works, and this is a Greg Crabtree thing, is you want to maintain at least a 15% profit share per him, but that's again with you paying yourself like an industry expected salary. Like a lot of times, what chiropractors say, "Oh, I'm 50% profitable," but they're counting like the 50% overhead is not including what they pay themselves, right? And that's not reality. If you went to go sell that practice, they would want to know what it costs for that doctor to treat patients. So this is all, predicated on you paying yourself a fair wage in this model. And then another thing here is a profit share is not ownership interest. It doesn't, like if you offer a 25% profit share, it doesn't mean that associate owns 25% of your business. Now that would be a separate thing. They could buy in or however you want to decide to do that. But profit sharing is not ownership interest. It's not shares and things of that nature. And then really what you want to consider some certain things is, sinking funds. So what we have a line item for sinking fund, and I go in the beginning of the year because you try to want to distribute out some of your expenses so it doesn't kill a month because of, oh yeah, malpractice insurances for both doctors came up in June. And so then you write all these checks and then there's no profit. So what I do is I take all my, malpractice insurances. We have a $2,000 sponsorship that we do for a running group, and then equipment repair for a couple $1,000, and a bunch of things like that are big ticket items, and you add it up, and then that, let's just say it's $16,000 a year, um, or let me just make it easier. Let's say it's $12,000 a year, and then you would have a line item that says sinking fund $1,000 per month. So 1,000 times 12 months is 12,000. And so that's a monthly expense is 1,000. Then you're going to want to also have a miscellaneous one on there. And that way it shows, okay, yeah, there's certain things I can't predict, and if it pops up, I'm going to provide you clarity with it. But it could be, this, it could be less, but you want to, and then I will show the miscellaneous expenses for that particular month on there, right? The other thing that I do is for each expense category, I will mark it as a fixed expense, right? Like my rent is a fixed expense, my phone service is a fixed expense, and then there's some that are estimated, right? So like my merchant processing fees is an estimate. So I provide clarity, but knowing that these estimates could be different. And then one thing we make sure we do is review each month. So when we get the collection report, and then I go in and do all my overhead and put it on a Google sheet, we review it together to provide clarity on it. Now, this looks potentially different than your QuickBooks. Okay, so the Google sheet you put on there, and or however spreadsheet is going to look a little bit different than your QuickBooks, and I'll talk about that in a second. And again, I'm not going to be able to cover everything today. I want to get you the conceptual idea of this model and how it works. Okay. One other thing on there is you should, and this is something I learned from Ray and also another doc that's been doing this for a multi-clinic practice, is a management fee. So you would charge a management fee in there, maybe $2,000 plus or minus whatever, and that goes into the overhead as well. And that's for you to be the manager of this. So you're paying yourself um, your salary for being a treating doctor, whatever that is, that goes into your payroll. That's an expense. You have a management fee for managing all this stuff and managing the practice. That's an expense. And then your third way of, as the owner, getting paid would be obviously owner's distribution on profits. Okay. And so that's kind of, the different categories you have on this spreadsheet. And this comes from Ray's work, is you're going to have a category of wages and benefits, and you're going to tease out the payroll plus the payroll employer taxes, your facilities. That's all things like rent and phones and power bill and cable and all that. You're going to have professional services such as merchant processing, bookkeeping, EHRs, all that type of stuff. You're going to have your marketing category. You're going to have your supplies category, and then you could have a miscellaneous, and that's where I put my sinking fund and other miscellaneous expenses. And those would be the categories that you have teased out for breaking that down for the person. And then from there, I monitor two key things to make decisions, right? And that's going to be the 2.0 number I mentioned, and also profit margin. And as Greg Crabtree talks about, is he really believes in the 2.0 number for your payroll, and then profit margin of 15%. Now he says you can go down to 10% if you're investing in something like an associate doctor. That might ding your profit for a little bit, but you want to come back up. And then there's definitely nothing wrong with being more profitable, which is great. And then so if, like for instance, I felt like in our Q1 we did really well with our 2.0 number. We were payroll light, but we have some interns, so we weren't burning our staff out. Because like one of the things that Crabtree talks about is that if you're too payroll light, it might look good for you financially, but you're burning your team out and you can run into problems. If you're too payroll bloated, then that's obviously an issue. And so there's that sweet spot. And that's why it's so important for the team members that you have to be very efficient, right? So give you an example. Imagine if you had an associate you were paying $90,000 to, and they just weren't bringing in business, or that you were giving them new patients and they couldn't keep them, right? So now you've got a problem where there's a bad labor efficient ratio there. That person is not bringing in enough revenue to offset the cost. And that's when you could be payroll bloated. Whereas if that doc, if she's like killing it, and then it makes sense. Then that math works out. And so I monitor that 2.0 number and then also the profit margin. And so we were really good on the profit margin. And if we say to ourselves, and I go and I talk to our team and say, okay, we're going to hire a CA, right? When I'm going to hire a CA, I can show it's like, look, we've got the room in our payroll on this 2.0 scale. And then we're also, we were 28% operating profit margin in Q1. And so there's wiggle room on the operating profit margin as well. Now, that's where I want to give you a differential of what operating profit margin is. And again, I'm not an expert, but just the way I'm looking at it here versus what you might see as actual profit margin on your QuickBooks, right? So if you're paying down a bunch of like, let me see, if you're paying down certain debts and things like that, you might not show a lot of profit per se. And then that's where you dive into certain things like EBITDA, and I'll let you Google that. I'm not going to do it. So I'm bringing it up because I don't want you to get hung up in the weeds on what your QuickBooks and your EBITDA is and this and that and the other thing versus um, your operating. So example, like let's say you and your wife go out to dinner and you guys have a legitimate talk about business and you have a $350 dinner. In my opinion, that would not be part of your operating costs in this profit sharing model. So you wouldn't show up as an expense on that. And so in that scenario, your operating profit margin would be different, but on your QuickBooks, it's going to show up as an expense, as a business expense. And so I think you get that one example and you can extrapolate out the other examples there. Let's take a short break from today's episode to tell you about the best decision I've made in my clinic in the last 10 years, and that has been adding shockwave therapy to our clinic. The outcomes have been really impressive. Certain conditions we were struggling with in the past, we're now seeing results with the shockwave therapy for that. And second of all, the ROI has been really good. When you make a big investment in something, you want to see a return, and we're seeing that return in clinical outcomes and in our investment, and that's been really nice to see. I chose Keenest Medical for 4 reasons. One is the technology is top notch. You have to have great technology. There's a lot out there that isn't quite up to snuff. The second thing is they have a really good clinical training. They have an exclusive partnership with Academy of Shockwave Excellence so that you can become clinically proficient in shockwave. You do need to get skilled at it. I think that's a big differentiator between practices that are getting great results and seeing the ROI is they have a great clinical aspect to that as well. So you want to get trained appropriately. Third is they have in-house service team for all of your technical support, which is key when you're investing in a machine like this. And then lastly, they have a very in-depth marketing and business support for you so that you can launch this into your practice effectively, that you can get that ROI on it, that you can get the clinical outcomes. And they also have really good financing options if you need that. So go to keenestmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, mention MCM podcast and receive a free Shockwave in practice book with a purchase of a unit. So that's keenestmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, and mention MCM podcast. So then the last topic on it that I'll discuss is that, okay, now you got profit, right? And we're doing ours quarterly. So it's quarterly profit share, not monthly. It's just too complicated to do it monthly. It's I think a quarter spread smooth things out. If you have a really good month and then a really bad month, it's kind of a kick in the what. So it's nice to spread it out quarterly. And then from there, let's just say in a particular quarter, maybe you do it a month, however you want to do it. But if you do it, and let's just say you had 10,000, I'm gonna make it super easy with money. You had $10,000 in profit for the quarter. And then let's say you did a 25% profit share. The associate would get $2,500 of that 10, and then you would get $7,500 of that 10,000. Now, that $7,500 is now technically the true profit, right? So that's again where I'm telling you the QuickBooks profit and your profit based on your operating margin here is different. So obviously, if you write that doctor a $2,500 payroll check for his or hers profit share, that is actually overhead in your QuickBooks. That's not going to be profit. So you're not going to pay tax on that profit. So even though your operating profit was 10,000, the QuickBooks is going to represent $7,500. I hope that makes sense. Like, right. So once you've written that check, the profit really is now $7,500, not the 10. So you wouldn't pay tax on profits of 10. You would pay tax on profits of the 7,500. Okay. And so out of that $7,500, Crabtree would talk about his kind of split in thirds. He has like a 40, 30, 30. Again, I'll let you work with your accountant on it. And he's kind of super conservative on 40% going to tax on profit. But let's just say you split it up in thirds for the sake of this conversation. A third to taxes on profit. A third he recommends reinvesting back into the business. And that could be paying off debt, could be buying equipment, could be hiring someone, could be adding money into a sinking fund or emergency fund, whatever. It's just going back into the business for growth. And the other third would be for your personal distribution. And so that's that third way of you getting paid. So the more profitable you are, the more money you're going to make, the more money you're going to be able to reinvest into the business, and the more money the associate's going to make. And so that's the contextual aspect of it, is that everybody's working to be profitable. Everybody cares about profit. When you have an associate's on a percentage, they don't really care about profit. They just care about what they've collected. And so there's decisions that are, there's some blind spots on there. But when we're all working towards profit, we know, yeah, how can we do this? How can we collect as much as we can? How can we collect as much as we can efficiently and go above and beyond to make this happen? And I think that's what we're seeing by implementing this profit sharing model. And when it works out and you're handsomely profitable, everybody's doing well. And if there's overhead, it's taken into consideration, right? And it's not all in the back of the owner. And so that is a lot of the details of the profit sharing models, not all the details, but I want you to start thinking about that. I do. It's going very well for us. I think there's different seasons of practices where it makes sense. I think if you're thinking about satellite offices, really, really think about this, because one of the killers of satellite offices is doctor turnover. And if you got someone on a profit sharing model, that's going to reduce that. So I hope this was helpful. Again, our coaching clients and mastermind clients have access to stuff like this and are helping guiding them through unique situations for their practice. And so check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. We're here to help you in any way we can. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you want to make the shift from busy, broke, and broken to time-free and cash confident, or you just want to continue with the exponential growth, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. Look at the MCM Mastery tab, watch the short video on there, and check out what we are doing now for evidence-informed chiropractors. We are equal parts coaching and marketing done for you. Yes, you shoot some videos, we help you with campaign strategies and ideas and really become a thought leader in your community. You shoot those videos, you send them to us, we produce, edit, and brand them to you. Then we distribute them through all of your channels. We also take them and we turn it into one good blog per month. And every other month, we have Darcy Sullivan producing a robust blog with a topic that you pick from her database to help with your SEO. So we essentially become your content marketing agency to make sure your practice is always having ethical, elegant content marketing to help grow your practice. On the coaching side, we also help you with everything from marketing ideas to business, communications, finances, anything practice growth, and really try to help prevent you from being stuck on that island. And we hold you accountable. We have a great group of doctors that are just doing amazing things. And we look forward to help you out to take that next step in your practice. So again, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and learn more.